Welcome to Babylonstoren. I'm Gundula, and I'm very excited today because my colleague Arné Stander, who's an entomologist here, has invited me to have a look at how he transfers a swarm of bees from one hive to another hive. Let's go have a look. Hello Arné. I'm delighted to hear that you actually managed to save that swarm that got damaged by that terrible storm when the oak tree broke. So I'd love you to show me where the hive is now and how you managed to actually keep them safe.
Initially, a branch fell to the ground with a lot of those bees, and 2 days later the tree fellas came and removed most of the other remaining branches, and they took all those branches to the compost heap, and that's when I decided I actually want to save that swarm. So I went to that compost heap with a small catch box, and I got it as closely to the swarm as possible. And then I decided I want to make a small breach for the bees, which makes it easier for them to get to the hive without having to fly to the entrance. And I actually made the box also quite attractive by actually putting a frame of honey inside. I left them for a few hours, and when I got back, all of them moved into the small catch box. And immediately I took that catch box to one bee camp. Step 1. Use the smoker and puff a little amount of smoke into the entrance of the hive. Step 2. Put the empty box in the place of the current hive. This will allow for field bees to return back to the new empty box. Step 3. Use the hive tool to loosen the lid of the current hive. Step 4. Puff more smoke over the frames. Step 5. Use the hive tool to loosen the frames, putting them over one by one into the new box, exactly in the same position as they were. Fill the rest of the gaps with new frames. Step 6. Gather the bees to one corner of the current hive by tapping it on the ground, and then release the bees into the new hive. Step 7. All the bees are now inside the new hive, and you can now close the lid.
These bees looked so comfortable in their hive. Why do you want to move them into a bigger hive?
Bees need space. In order to give them more space, I need to put them into a bigger hive. If you think about our situation as humans, we also require more space if our families expand. We want bigger cars and bigger homes. That's the same thing with the bees. As well as when they need to make honey, they also need the super. And the super fits on that standard size beehive and won't fit on that smaller hive.
Arné, what happens in nature when there's nobody to move them into a larger hive?
So if the bees don't get the necessary space they need, they'll feel forced to leave the hive. So 2 things can happen. Either the bees will leave the hive completely, so you'll sit there with an empty hive, or the bees will split, the swarm will split. So half of the colony will leave with the old queen, and the rest of the population remaining will produce a new queen.
What would you do to really ensure that the bees that have been moved to this new hive will make this their permanent home?
Most importantly, the queen bee needs to be inside that new box. That's why when I worked with the catch box, putting the frames over one by one, you have to do it very carefully. And the last thing I did, I made sure that all the bees that were still inside at the bottom of the catch box, I shook them all over into the new box. And that's how I made sure that all the bees are inside with the queen bee, and that's when I closed the lid.
Arné, I see that you've decided to leave the hive in the same place. Would you ever decide to move it to another location?
Absolutely, you'll be able to move them. I decided I want to keep that swarm specifically there in that part of that whole apiary, in that bee camp. And that's why when I started working, I just put the new hive in the old hive's position. So the bees going out into the field to forage the pollen and the nectar and the water will return back to the new hive. And as I finished putting all the frames over into the new hive, and I closed the lid, the bees were just returning back into the new hive.
I've had a fabulous morning with Arné, and it's been great to see how he's managed to save this little swarm. So if you're ever stuck in a similar situation, please contact your local beekeeper and do the responsible thing. Now, if there are any other gardening or gardening related videos you're interested in, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's lots we can share with you. Thank you. Goodbye.